I want to move on to something else in terms of the future debates, because I mean, assuming that there are going to be some, I think what is important about this debate, whether or not Clinton gets a bump in the polls, and I suspect she might. I think maybe a point or two, but I think it's gonna kick a trend off in that direction. We're going to get a reaction from Trump himself and from Trump campaign, and it's going to change the tenor of the next debate. And I suspect we're also going to hear more on this number 3? Is this about him paying taxes? Yeah. Okay. All right. I think we're going to hear more about this, because Clinton didn't make as much about this as I think she could have going forward. This is a clip number 3, and they're talking about Trump's tax returns, which she did a very good job of pointing out, like, why someone might not release their tax returns, despite the fact that that's been the tradition of presidential candidates probably since most people in the room have been alive.
Why? And I think there may be a couple of reasons. First, maybe he's not as rich as he says he is. Second, maybe he's not as charitable as he claims to be. Third, we don't know all of his business dealings, but we have been told through investigative reporting that he owes about $650 million to Wall Street and foreign banks. Or maybe he doesn't want the American people, all of you watching tonight, to know that he's paid nothing in federal taxes, because the only years that anybody's ever seen were a couple of years when he had to turn them over to state authorities when he was trying to get a casino license, and they showed he didn't pay any federal income tax. So if he's paid zero, that means zero for troops, zero for vets, zero for schools or health.
That makes me smart. I have a feeling that we may hear that refrain again. That sort of reminds me of the response when they had that exchange about the you didn't pay the people working for you, because that's business. I have a feeling that that's also going to be a problem that comes back.
Oh, I do too. In fact, I mentioned those two responses by him in my piece for Salon this morning. I think that those were very revealing. I mean, for a couple of reasons. I mean, that, and there was one other too, which I felt was really, I think she really hit him in a way that's going to hurt him, which was her bringing up, which we all know about, but I think doing it in front of an audience of 100 million people is really useful. That he didn't pay his contractors, and his reaction to that was, well, maybe they didn't do a good job.
Oh, right. That's when. Okay, right. It's the. Let's play that housing collapse. It's just a 30-second clip. Let's play that. That's the one where he said that's business. I think that is. I imagine that's going to be an ad released within the next day. But here is that clip.
Donald was one of the people who rooted for the housing crisis. He said back in 2006, gee, I hope it does collapse, because then I can go in and buy some and make some money. Well, it did collapse.
That's called business, by the way.
9 million people lost their jobs, 5 million people lost their homes, and $13 trillion in family wealth was wiped out.
Tell us your thoughts on that, because it may very well be business, but I think really what comes out of that is most people start going like, hey, maybe we should look into this stuff about business a little bit more.
Well, I think so. And it just, it's one of those, of course there will be Trump people who goes, well, he was just playing by the rules. That's how he got rich. And, there's a certain strain in American life where people think, if you're rich, that means you're a winner, and if you're a winner, that means, you'll win for me or something, and so I don't know, there are certain people, even among his main voters, which are white, non-college educated, working class type, middle class types who, were probably the victims of the recession, and many of whom really did suffer. But I think that what that says, what she did, and this is something you'll be interested in, Sam, because it's a big theme of yours, I think, through this, in the hopes that Clinton would take a take a stand on trying to tie him to the Republican Party and tie the Republican Party to him. Last night on MSNBC, Robert Costa, the Washington Post reporter who has very good ties into the right wing, he's an excellent reporter, and he said this. He said, she yanked him toward the Republican Party. She said, you're not going to be able to run as an outsider. You can't be a populist. She said, you're just like George W. Bush. You're trickle-down economics like Ronald Reagan. You're supply side trumped up. This is a candidate whose real appeal is that he's non-ideological, that he's not running as a partisan Mitt Romney, George W. Bush Republican. And she said, I'm not going to let you. So, I think that in some way, somewhere in the back of people's minds, so some of these, and I think most of them are probably non-voters, the kinds who said, I hate them both, not a dime's worth of difference, and I hate those Washington Republicans. They're the people who hate Paul Ryan and, hate everything that's been going on, and they think Donald Trump is different. I think she may have planted a seed of doubt in some of their minds that maybe that's not true. And his reaction, which is, he said, well, that makes me smart, and she took it a step further and said, well, other people have had to pay for the roads and the schools and all that. You didn't bother to do that. These are things that, maybe people don't want to admit it in their conscious mind, but it's a cutting attack on him at his central argument, which is that he's different than all these other people, that he is, he's a populist, he cares about the working man.
Yeah.
Now, for me, I've never understood why anybody thought that, but that combination of him not paying taxes and him, kind of bragging about it and saying that that's just business. I mean, he also said it when, they were talking about people
screwing the contractors.
Screwing contractors and saying, well, maybe they didn't do a good job. That's the kind of thing that working people, at least some, I don't know who, that somewhere along the line, it may, sort of at least raise a little doubt that maybe, this guy is not who they thought he was. And this is the truth. He is not, even his populist positions on trade, and I absolutely believe this is true. People like to give him credit for that. They gave him credit last night, for that was his strongest part of the debate, was in the beginning when he was kind of nailing her on NAFTA, and he was. It seemed as though he was at least competent on the subject. But I believe people are misinterpreting Donald Trump on trade. Donald Trump doesn't care about workers. He says, I'm going to bring jobs back, but that's a statistic by which he measures American greatness. It is not about those individual workers. He has said over and over again that he thinks that we should bring competition to the United States, and that basically one state, you can move your plant to another state that wants to lower wages, and those workers will agree to those lower wages.
He said wages are too high. He said wages are too high.
Wages are too high. So this guy's populist, argument is not about the actual workers or even anything specific to individual people's lives. It's about a grand vision of America being number one and beating all those foreigners who he believes have taken advantage. They're not supposed to grow. Only we're supposed to grow. They shouldn't have an economy that there's any growth. The Chinese should be, mired in famine or something. That's the only way that we can say that we're on top. It's a nationalist argument. It's not an economic argument. And I think that people have misinterpreted him all the way along. And if you see when he talks about, like the potential trade war with China, which of course he's threatening every 5 minutes, really, when he says that, it's very often in conjunction with his argument about how the Chinese don't respect us, and they're building this air base or this island in the middle of the South China Sea and breaking the treaties, and we're going to have to do that. And that's a national security thing there. That has nothing to do with trade, but it's often in the same breath that he's saying this. It's about being, disrespected. That's his entire view, is that America isn't treated well in his view. And so I think that people misinterpret that, and I think that kind of digging at him as she did last night from the other side, which is saying, what about the workers? What about the people you didn't pay? What about the fact that you don't pay taxes? I think that makes an argument that starts to kind of make you wonder, what is he talking about with this trade? I hope so.
Well, the irony is,
because I think people are being misled.
The irony is that that the big argument we're hearing in favor of TPP now is more of a national security one, it seems to me, because I think the people promoting the trade pact realize, like, we're not getting anywhere by arguing this is going to help from a trade perspective, because from a trade perspective, by all rights, this really doesn't have that much impact. Like, we already have trade agreements with these countries. The GDP that it's going to add is negligible over the course of like 30, 40 years or something. So the biggest argument we're hearing about passing the TPP at this point is a national security one. Bill Clinton made this argument the other day on CNBC. President Obama has made this. You're hearing a lot of people argue that it's a national security, prevent China from dictating the rules going forward. So it's a similar one in some ways to what Trump is arguing. And you're right about the jobs. He looks at jobs as a metric for how well corporate America is doing, as opposed to, I'm going to protect workers in the context of these trade deals. Hey folks, Sam Seder here. I just got back from a company-wide meeting. Accounting is really coming down on me hard. We need to get to 100,000 subscribers as soon as possible. So please enjoy this channel. Subscribe right down there.